Alright, so 10.3 deals with circles. We're going to start with our equation of the circle. So before we know what the equation of a line is, we know what the equation of a parabola looks like, we know what the equation of an exponential function looks like. Now this is what an equation of the circle looks like. We need to have both our x's squared and our y's squared. The h and k are going to be our center of the circle. So our center is h comma k. But looking at this equation, these minus signs in the middle just mean that we have to flip the sign of h and k. So if it starts out negative, our h and k, so our center of the circle, is going to be positive. If it starts out positive, our center is going to have negative coordinates. So the negative signs, the minus signs, just mean that we flip the sign of h and k. And then this is going to be equal to r squared. So r is our radius of the circle. And our equation gives it to us squared. So we just have to take the square root to find what r is. This section I actually think is super easy, especially because you guys get this formula on the quiz. The quiz will be open notes, so you have this formula. And graphing, all you do is take what's out of the formula. Let's do our first example. So our first example is just asking us for the center and the radius of the circle. So our center is going to be 2 coordinates. Our h, so our first one comes from the x parentheses, and we need to change the sign. So since it's a negative 16, it becomes positive 16. And our second comes from the y parentheses, and we need to change the sign. So since it's a positive 9, it becomes negative 9. So that's our center. Now our radius, we just take the square root of what's on the other side of the equal sign. So since we have 144, the square root of 144 would be 12. So our radius is 12. Okay, for the next example, we have to graph. But in order to graph, we need those same 2 things. So we need the center and the radius. So our center is going to be a coordinate point. So we get the first one from our x parentheses, but we have to change the sign. So since it's positive 1, it becomes negative 1. We get the second from our y parentheses. Since it's negative 3, it becomes positive 3. So now we're going to go to our graph and go to the left 1 and up 3. So that's our center of the circle. Now our radius, we just take the square root of what's on the other side of the equals. So the square root of 25 is 5. So our radius is 5. Now to graph this, our radius, we take our radius and go in every direction 5 points, 5 places. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is going to be the edge of our circle. We're going to go down 5, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to go 5 places in every direction, and then we just draw our circle. So in my opinion, this is the easiest graphing that we've done so far. All we need is our center and our radius, and then we just plot the points. Any questions on this one? Alright, let's go to our next example. Again, we have to graph it. So we need our center, which is going to be a coordinate point, and then our radius. Our radius is just going to be a number. So we get our coordinate points from here, but it's important that we flip the signs. So since we have a -3, it becomes a +3, and since we have a +1, it becomes a -1. So our center is 3, -1. So we're going to go to the right 3 and down 1. Now our radius, we just take the square root of what's on the other side of the equal sign. So the square root of 36 is 6, so our radius is 6. So now we go from our point that we have and we count 6 in every direction. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is our circle. Any questions? Alright, so for the next couple examples, we're going the opposite way. We're starting with the graph, and we need to come up with the equation. So our equation is always going to be x, y, and then equals our radius. So now we just have to find what the center is and our radius, and then we just plug those in. So looking at our center, we go to the right 2 and down 5. So our center is 2, -5. So before, when we found our center, we had to change the signs, so the same thing works when we go backwards. So since we have a +2, we need to plug in a -2. And since we have a -5, we need to plug in a +5. And now we need to find our radius. So we're just going to count from our circle to the edge, from our center to the edge. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. So our radius is 4. And now before, when we went this way, when we started with the equation and found our radius, we took the square root. But now when we go backwards, we're going to square it. So we have 4 squared, which is 16. So this is our equation for the circle. Any questions here? Okay, we have 2 more examples, almost done. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We always start with our parentheses, and our parentheses are squared, which this is the easiest part because you guys have this. You have the formula in front of you when you take the quiz and when you do the homework. So you always start with this. Now we need to find our center and our radius. So now we look at the picture. Our center, we stay at 0 and go up 1. So our center is going to be 0, 1. And now we just plug this in. So 0, we don't have to write plus 0 or minus 0. What we can do is just erase our parentheses and just make it x squared. So when it's 0, you're not going to have parentheses, it's just going to be x squared or y squared, depending on what the 0 is. And then since we have a positive 1 here, it becomes a negative 1 in our equation. And our radius, we just count 1, 2, 3. So our radius is 3. And when we go this way to our equation, we have to square it, so it becomes 9. So this is our equation of the graph.